US President Joe Biden has condemned his Russian counterpart's actions in Ukraine as Western countries join in imposing additional sanctions on the leader and Russia. Let's go live to White House correspondent for Washington Examiner, Christian Datoc. Christian, what is the latest coming out of the United States?
Well, Tim, we heard the president speak about this on Friday, and this was a rather monumental step in the sanctioning of President Putin and Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. Putin marks only the fourth foreign leader that the United States has sanctioned personally. He joins Nicolas Maduro of Venezuela, Kim Jong-un of North Korea, and of course, Bashar al-Assad of Syria. And what this shows is that the United States is not prepared to roll over and let Russia take Ukraine like President Putin wants. Now, there has been some controversy. People here in the United States have suggested that perhaps Biden should have started with that top level of sanctions back on Monday when Putin first recognized those separatist regions in eastern Ukraine. But ultimately, the United States has said these sanctions packages have been crafted carefully to put maximum pressure on Putin and the Russian oligarchy while protecting Western economies, and they're trying to minimize the impact on the Russian people themselves. And I think one of the ways we're seeing this manifest are the massive protests that we've seen in Moscow, St. Petersburg, and cities across the globe. It does seem that President Putin miscalculated the outpouring of public support peoples of the world would have for Ukraine and the resilience of the Ukrainian people themselves in taking up arms to defend their country.
It does look like he has become tyrannical if he wasn't always that way. What is the general view from the US government?
Well, the general view is that we've known who Vladimir Putin has been since he took over Russia 25 years ago. And while he might have been cool and calculated in the past, we've known he's always wanted to restore Russia to its former Soviet greatness. Now, what I think the big change here has to do with the internal pressure that he's been facing over the past several years throughout the coronavirus pandemic. Putin has been facing severe, unpopular waves like we've never seen before. And again, this is sort of an all-or-nothing campaign, the way the U.S. officials who I've spoken to are describing it. He needed to act now, make some type of grand gesture to regain his, iron grip control over his own population. He thought a war with Ukraine was the best way to do that, and he seems to have miscalculated.
And the resistance is quite remarkable in the Ukraine.
That's right. We've seen hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians either enlisting right out of the bat or returning to the country after they've gotten their families into neighboring Poland or other neighboring countries. I think what's important here is what we've seen out of NATO. NATO, of course, has activated their response force for the first time ever. That's a sizable 40,000 troop massive force that will be spread out across the eastern flank. We've also seen additional technology and support deployments from the United States and other NATO countries sent to Ukraine. I think one of the greatest images that we've seen coming out of this first few days of fighting is the Ukrainian people's ability to use these Javelin missiles supplied by the West to really decimate a lot of these Russian tank convoys. On the surface, Russia's military should have been able to easily roll over Ukraine. It's significantly larger, it's significantly better equipped. But again, President Putin did not count on the resilience of the Ukrainian people. And I think a lot of people around the world are looking at President Zelensky of Ukraine, the courage he's shown in not evacuating Kyiv and staying there and rallying his own people. That's been quite remarkable to witness over the last several days.
One of the great fears, of course, is we're talking about Russia, which is an enormous country with a massive military, and he's only using a small portion of it here. They're also nuclear equipped, and some of his language to those that would get involved was just off the charts the other day.
There was one speech he gave in particular, Tim, about how the West would face consequences we've never felt before should we decide to retaliate militarily against Moscow or even against Russian forces in Ukraine. And I have to give President Biden credit on this one. He has been consistent throughout this entire conflict that the U.S. will not be sending boots into Ukraine. It is unfortunate that the people of Ukraine are not getting more military assistance from the West. But the fact of the matter is they are not a NATO nation. Article 5 does not bind the rest of Europe, the United States, Canada, all the rest of the NATO nations to send troops to Ukraine. So I think what President Putin sort of used as a nuclear threat has been seen as more of a bluff at this point in time. Russia is nuclear, does have a nuclear arsenal, but of course, so does the rest of the world, of course, being led by the United States. And I do think he wants Russia to succeed ultimately at the end of the day. He's not going to risk a nuclear strike against Moscow just by using a tactical nuclear weapon on the battlefield in Ukraine to sort of get over these roadblocks they faced over the past week.
And it's a change of pace, of course. It's blown COVID off the front pages around the world. What is the latest there?
It has sort of put COVID in the rear view, but there was a rather large development here in Washington on Friday, Tim. The CDC has been sort of getting a lot of pressure to update their mask guidance. And on Friday, Director Michelle Walensky announced that the mask guidance is no longer in place as it was over the past 2 years. They're now, instead of looking at COVID cases as the determining metric, going to be utilizing hospitalization rates and hospital capacity. In real-world terms, what this means is that roughly 70% of the U.S. population is no longer going to be under strict mask mandates. They will still be in place for public transportation, so whether you're riding the train to work or flying across the country, you'll still need to wear a mask. But this has been a massive shift. I mean, this is really the first time since March of 2020 that most of the country won't be required to wear masks every single day. It's a big step forward. And again, politically, it makes sense that it's dropped right before President Biden's State of the Union this coming Tuesday.
Yeah, and just finally getting back to the Ukraine situation politically in the US, it's pivotal for Joe Biden at the moment and his administration, the way they handle this domestically.
It is pivotal. Of course, President Biden did not have the best run of things in the way the Afghanistan withdrawal shook out last year. And unfortunately, most Americans do not vote in terms of foreign policy. The only time in my lifetime when it's really been a deciding factor was in the 2004 election when George Bush, of course, won re-election after his first few years of the war on terror. Now, again, domestically, and we've talked about this to a degree in terms of the people in Russia protesting Putin's own war, there's a near unanimous outpouring of support for Ukraine at this point in time. Some political opponents of the president are saying he's done some things wrong, but ultimately, I do think this is playing out fairly well because of the sense of transparency that President Biden is bringing to the table, because of the consistent line that he's maintained for about the last month or so as Russia has built up these troops. It's a tragedy, but it will probably play out pretty well for President Biden's poll numbers.
Thank you, Christian. Appreciate it. We'll catch up with you very soon.
Be well, Tim.